I ask the gentleman from California whether he continues to insist on his point of order.
Mr. Chairman, I withdraw my point of order.
The gentleman has withdrawn his point of order, and I recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I sincerely appreciate the gentleman's sentiment, but I cannot support this amendment. First, there are opioid and addiction-ravaged communities throughout the United States, not just in rural areas, but in urban areas. We heard the tragic story shared by my colleague from Illinois, Mr. Davis. We hear stories all the time in the suburban communities I live in, and we certainly hear these stories in rural communities in Illinois, Missouri, and truly across the entire nation. I would like to submit for the record that a letter of support for this bill that comes from states like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Utah, Nebraska. These are states that have rural communities. Some of them are rural states, but all of them are from states that support this bill. I'd like to submit that for the record.
So ordered.
Second, I have a concern that the amendment would prioritize slots to places that may not yet be ready to train the doctors in these specialties. I appreciate the need to talk about access to medicine in general and the need to have doctors, but here we're talking about specific medical professionals trained to address addiction medicine and substance abuse disorder. These need to go to specialty programs that are trained and are ready. It's a matter of urgency as well as readiness. We need to train these people immediately. Third, the amendment would give slots to the 25 states with the fewest residency positions, not by population, and this would have no relationship to need or the desire of the hospital to expand their training programs. Hospitals in West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, all states severely ravaged by the addiction crisis, are already eligible under the underlying legislation. Finally, all rural GME programs are currently eligible to expand resident training or start new programs with or without this bill. I cannot support this amendment as it undermines the intent of the bill to get new residents trained quickly at places that are now ready to do so. With that, I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on the gentleman from Missouri's amendment?
Thank you, and I'll just be brief, and I appreciate where everyone's coming from. The one reflection I will have is I hear some conversation about the need to get doctors in rural communities, and I appreciate that and understand that, and that's a general challenge that I think together, Republicans, Democrats, we can work to address. This bill is to focus on a very specific need to train doctors to deal with the opioid epidemic that is ravaging our nation, that is in all of our communities, urban, rural, and everything in between. Let's get these doctors trained at the place where they can be trained. To talk about commitment, I appreciate that. The space, one second, I'll come back to you. The space between commitment and capacity is simply time. And at this moment, let's get these residencies where they need to be. Let's commit to work together. I will commit to work together to do whatever it takes to try to get more doctors into rural communities. And with that, I'll yield my time. I'll yield my time back to Mr. Doggett.
Mr. Doggett, would you yield?
Gentleman from Texas, yield.
The time was yielded, the time was reclaimed, and the time had already expired. With that, let me recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Dr. Wenstrup, on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's really nice to hear from all these experts today. Have anyone else in here been involved with starting a residency program? No, you haven't. I have, directly. And I find it insulting to say that our rural areas aren't capable of starting a residency program.
Will the gentleman?
No, I will not yield, because I think we've heard your opinion enough. These rural areas, they are ready, and they are overwhelmed with patients, and they are underserved with providers. The key to a residency program is having the volume of patients that you need to get your training. And so I would agree in a lot of cases, it would be urban areas, but not in this case. I wonder how many people in this room have read this book, The True Tale of America's Opioid Epidemic, by Sam Quinones, who's here in town today. Read this book, because it addresses how we got there and how it's a problem in our urban areas and our rural areas. We have a doctor in Portsmouth, Ohio, which is on the cover here, who took time from his practice to run as a state representative because of this problem in rural Portsmouth, Ohio.
I got to recognize you, Mike.
And his practice is now 100% treating addiction. You cannot tell me that they aren't ready to train people because they have the patience, and that's the key. And like I said, I would agree that there are times when the urban area is the place to train because of the volume of patients, but the volume of patients is there. And it's a fact that more often than not, people stay in the area they're trained. So you can talk about training in these urban areas, and you think they're just going to go off to the rural area. That's not reality. I can't understand why anybody would be against this amendment, where we are trying to fill a need where it is most needed in America and make sure that we're going to the places where it's needed. And I think Ms. Sewell would understand it, and Dr. Davis would understand it. And why you want to say the only place this can happen is in these urban areas where they're so ready, believe me, our urban areas
Will
are
the gentleman
ready,
yield?
and it's an insult to the doctors that are in that area to say that they can't conduct a residency program.
Will the
And I
gentleman
yield
yield?
back.